I'm the bad guy. I'm the, I'm the, I'm the bad.
So there we have it. Super Bowl 59 is in the bag, and it's fly, Eagles fly, as Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts led the Philadelphia Eagles to a dominant 40-22 victory over the Kansas City Chiefs to clinch the Vincent Lombardi Trophy for the second time in their history. Welcome to Across the Gridiron. I'm Matt, and once again, I'm joined with what many people call the Jalen Hurts of podcasting, Eddie Equo, as we give our take on the night's action. So, Eddie, morning after the night before, as a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, how are you feeling right now?
Honestly, there couldn't be a worse day, to wake up into the world and, find out that we live in a universe that the Philadelphia Eagles have won two Super Bowls in 3 years. It's it's the worst day as a Dallas Cowboy fan. There are lots of Cowboy fans all across the world right now who are having an absolutely miserable day. The people that are getting, pissed off with their co-workers. Nothing is working right with the teams. People are arguing with their missus. People are just like screaming at other people on the road. Lots of road rage going on. Honestly, this there couldn't have been a worse thing to happen to the world than for the Philadelphia Eagles to go ahead and win a Super Bowl. And listen, Matt, I watched that game, as most people did, hoping to be entertained. You remember this movie, Gladiators, when he was like that, and he was like, "Are you not entertained?" Right? This is how I wanted to feel after the Super Bowl, with the Chiefs smashing and taking it to the Eagles. What did I get? Philadelphia Eagles. It was a whooping.
Yeah, it really was. I've got to say the 40-22 scoreline does not paint a fair reflection on that game at all. And I do find it, which we'll come into a bit more detail later. And I do find it funny that most people, NFL fans, wanted the Chiefs to lose because they have become the New York Patriots. So New York, sorry, the
New
New
England.
England Patriots. That's what I meant to say. But not you. You're the
And for a
only
lot of people in the
person.
Dallas area, I don't.
Oh, but it was. I mean, look, credit where it's due. They absolutely dominated the Chiefs in all three phases. The Chiefs defense tried their best. 42-22 did not really paint a true reflection of that game, did it? It was the Eagles put up some absolutely insane numbers in the first half. The Chiefs came back with a few sort of garbage yards. I think I heard it described towards the towards the back end of the game to make the score somewhat respectable, but there was nothing really respectable about that performance. The Eagles got at Mahomes. I mean, you must have been watching that through your fingers. So certainly
Uh,
that first half.
Listen, right? It was like, and fans, you're gonna notice that we both love wrestling. So every now and then, when we can't find sense of something, we go to wrestling, and then we're like, right, let's pull something there, because that's something that you can relate to. That game, felt like one of those Mankind versus Undertaker match where it was steel cage, Mankind was falling literally the steel cage to the canvas. This is how it felt like the Kansas City Chief, where it was almost like they were both supposed to be fighting at the top of the steel cage. And then something just happened, and then the Kansas City Chiefs just fell through, the steel cage all the way to the mat. Um, I have never seen the Kansas City Chiefs look like the Dallas Cowboys. Um,
So
and
how long did it take to get a Cowboys reference in? I think that must be about 10 minutes of recording, maybe. That's a good start, Eddie. Well done. You crowbar that in at some point.
Honestly, you look at the Chiefs, right? And everyone, when we're doing this before the Super Bowl, we're like, listen, the Chiefs have been here. They've been here over and over again, been there, done that. They've got Andy Reid, who's supposedly the best coach in the world. When it comes to coaching combination and quarterback combination, you got to go with the Chiefs, right? Compare that to Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. But this was anything but. It was almost like, remember the time when people were sort of saying that Belichick saw like the plays of other teams, and there was this whole big furor about all of that. It almost felt like the Super Eagles and the Eagles.
It's on the record. You've said it. The Super Eagles from now on.
The Eagles almost knew exactly what Kansas City Chiefs was gonna do. And they were like, yeah, go ahead, do it. We'll be here waiting for you. It was just a very strange performance. And I don't think now you can start saying that it's a fluke because the two times that the Eagles have met the Kansas City Chiefs, they've outplayed them. And the only reason why the Chiefs won the last time was that Mahomes had the ball last. And it was 5 minutes to the end of that Super Bowl, and you would have thought the Eagles are going to get the ball back again. But they just ran the clock down to the ground. And I think it was what's the name of that, wide receiver that ran up onto the 1 yard line and then slid and instead of going in for the touchdown, for the key Chiefs to then kick the field goal and win that game. Uh, so you've got to say that Jalen Hurts, as much as this hurts me, excuse the pun, even though the pun was intended, um, you've got to have to start saying, is there anything that the likes of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow has over Jalen Hurts? Because he's doing what they cannot do. Because other than Joe Burrow, who's beaten Patrick Mahomes in a playoff situation, all the others have not been able to do that despite many attempts.
Yeah, I mean, for me, look, the Eagles capitalized. They put up 40 points in the Super Bowl, no mean feat. It was the defense that won them this game, right?
Mm,
And they are the number one defense in the league, and it proved they got after Mahomes. The amount of pressures, the sacks, the forced fumbles, the turnovers. Kansas City have not turned over the ball, and in this game alone, Mahomes was it two interceptions and one forced fumble. Right now, we've said, and a lot of people have said throughout the whole season that Kansas City have not been playing well, but they've been getting by. We both put the Chiefs to win this game because
yeah,
we said you never bet against the Chiefs.
yeah.
They've started slowly, they've ramped up, and Kelsey's, you know, really quiet regular season, but he's going to come good in the postseason,
Mm.
and didn't really do much in championship game, but he's going to come good in the Super Bowl. Mahomes, worst numbers of his career, he's going to come good in the Super Bowl or come good in the playoffs and get to the Super Bowl. I just wonder if this was just a game too far. And all those offensive line deficiencies, did they just all come home to roost in that one game? They could not cope with the pass rush.
Yeah, and the thing was that the Eagles didn't really have to send a lot of people against Patrick Mahomes. They were rushing four, right?
Yeah, they didn't blitz, did they? They didn't
No,
really
they didn't
blitz.
play
No.
at all. It wasn't like they sent the whole house and
Mm.
Patrick Mahomes was scrambling for his life. I think, and I've heard someone, say this, and it wasn't just me, but someone was saying that it almost felt like Mahomes was seeing ghosts, right? And there's only one quarterback that has ever talked about seeing ghosts, and when I was Sam, Mr. Sam Darnold, who's over at the Vikings right now,
Hmm.
and when he was at the Jets, he talked about after a game that he was seeing ghosts because that was the only thing I could explain why Mahomes was just so erratic. The Eagles were no match for the Kansas City's offensive line. Like they basically bullied the offensive line.
Hmm.
It wasn't like a safe. Sometimes, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, it was almost like I see they were moving their offensive line across. Like literally, I couldn't think of a time where he had a clean pocket, where he was just like standing there and knowing that the guys have got it. It was like 1, 2, 3, run. Like 1, 2, 3, run. And it's so incredible how, and when you can only rush four, it means that you can have two people covering in Kelsey. So it's like, okay, throw it to
Hmm.
him, right? The only player that every time he was targeted, he did something with Xavier Wardy.
Yep.
He was the only one, and whether they didn't respect him enough to cover him the way that they covered the rest,
Well,
uh,
he's got the pace, hasn't he? That's the
he
thing.
has
You
got
know,
the pace.
the
He has
Worthy's
got
just
the
got
pace.
the pace. You know.
He's got the pace. So he was able to kind of get himself free, and he made some really good touches, and scored some touchdowns. But for me, what the Eagles showed was that we've come into this game with multiple ways for us to win, right? We're gonna win it with our offense. We'll win it with a defense. We'll win it with special teams. We'll win it whether we're gonna run the ball or not, whether we're going to throw the ball or not, whether we're going to score on defense. It was almost like they came with the perfect plan into that game and they wanted it more. I think there's an element of that because we see that in our sports. Like you see two teams play each other, and then you're like, there really shouldn't be that much of a difference, but the score could have been 3 or 4-0, right? Classic example, the Arsenal Newcastle game, right? Newcastle could have scored 3 or 4 goals in that game. And on another day, Arsenal may have beaten Newcastle, but they wanted it more. Everything, were just extra for the Eagles. Everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. People were not having drops. While you look at the other side, Kelsey was having a drop. DeAndre Hopkins was having a drop. There were lots of players that were having drops, but everything was just sticking to the Eagles. It was
Mhm.
it was almost like a flawless performance. And I know that Jalen Hurts got an interception, but he didn't score from it. He didn't
No.
score from that interception. So it was almost like,
Yeah. I mean, I think you go into Super Bowl. I don't think you're going to have one team wanting it more than another because there was so much riding on this game for Kansas City. This was history riding on this for Kansas City. I think the way that I looked at, especially in that first half, I know that you know Kansas City have never won a Super Bowl without being 10 points down, right? So they always like to give the teams a head start.
yeah,
But I think at one point, once it started getting to once it started getting maybe too far out of their drift, I think there was one sequence when they had sack, pick six,
yeah,
right? And I think at that point it was absolutely demoralizing. And then there was obviously that play in I think, I can't remember if it was the third or the fourth quarter, when I believe it was on the fourth fumble. Everyone was saying, right, they're going to run the clock down. No. First play hurts. They call it the dagger. And again,
yeah,
it was just another touchdown. And all these little things kept creeping up, and that score, that the difference kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And once you go 3 scores down, 4 scores down, no matter how good you are, and you haven't even had it took until the third quarter until the Chiefs even had the ball in the
yeah,
Phillies
yeah,
half.
yeah,
Right. This isn't, if it wasn't Kansas City, you'd say this was men versus boys
yeah,
because it was so bad by the Kansas City Chiefs in a lot of cases. And the Chiefs have got the best side. The Eagles have the best defense in the league,
yeah,
and that showed.
yeah.
Now, the Chiefs actually did a good job on defense themselves because they defended Barkley incredibly well.
Mm,
Yeah, Barkley didn't put the numbers up,
yeah,
but he didn't need to.
no,
So the Chiefs obviously came in with that plan of how to stop Barkley because every man and his dog was saying that's going to be the danger from the
Play.
Eagles. That he is going to be the star player. He is Super Bowl MVP in waiting potentially, right?
Mm.
But they kept him quiet, and then Hurts came in and just had a great game, and he had a great game in the last Super Bowl. He was just on
Yeah.
the wrong side of it.
Yeah.
So put some respect on his name, Eddie. That's what I'm going to say.
Listen, I cannot. I think the debate is gone now. I cannot have the Dak versus Jalen Hurts debate anymore. I think that is forever gone.
That's the second Cowboys reference, is it then? Okay, right. I'm also going to score that one there.
Because I don't know if Dak is going to make a Super Bowl, never mind being a Super Bowl MVP. You know,
You want to trade him. I saw your little like rogue video. You were talking about trading him.
listen, look, listen, I'm beginning to accept the reality. And it was, I'm going to make another reference now. Like when, Shawn Michael was ready to go, right? When it was like the last, and he kept having those matches, and you were just like, okay, it's been great. It's been a great run, but getting on now, you shouldn't be taking this much punishment, stuff like that. And you're just like, yeah, it's probably time to say goodbye. But you've loved all the stuff that he's done, and you're just not quite ready, right? And for me, it feels like I think that there is a sense of acceptance now that you've shown me 8 years where you can get to. And I used to be frustrated about that argument about Dak Prescott because I felt like he was in a situation that it wasn't very, very helpful. People have talked about organizations that are terrible. We've talked about the Browns, talked about the Panthers, organizations that just cannot get out of their own way. But the Dallas Cowboys have a way of masking the the same level of dysfunction that is in those organizations because they win games, right? They win games in the regular season, but there's something fundamentally flawed about the way that the Dallas Cowboys actually run their operation, right? They get rid of, players that potentially they could still be getting value of. They don't use the full, what it's like almost like someone says, right, you need to do a test. It's an open book test, but you can also call a friend. Those game shows that are like, phone a friend, and what are the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Is it?
Yeah, who wants to be a millionaire? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
where it's like you call a friend 50-50 and all of that. And you've got all of those options that you could use at any point in time. The Dallas Cowboys have the draft. They can use free agency. They can use trade, right, to help build their teams. But they're just like, you know what? I'm good with one out of three, right? Those three options are there, but I'm never going to use it. I'm just going to keep it away. Like as if you don't use free agency this season, next season you get double the amount of free agency you're supposed to use. And if you don't trade players, you just get more players to trade in like 3 years' time. While the Eagles, they use everything. They would trade, for they traded for AJ Brown. You know, they would draft Jalen Carter, Jalen Hurts. They would they would they would they would use free agency. Bring players in. To make sure that their teams are constantly improving. But the Cowboys just and they make you feel like they're doing something. They distract people throughout the whole offseason with things that are not related to building the squad. What happened last offseason? We're talking about CD Lamb. We're talking about Dak Prescott getting contracts, right? They did nothing else. Derrick Henry was basically saying, "Hey, sign me," and they were like, "No, we don't have the money to sign him." And Ravens signed him for 8 million. Are you telling me that you couldn't afford 8 million? You could have if you had signed Dak Prescott immediately the season ended, because you could have got him for maybe 8 million less that you could have then used to then improve your squad. Now, what are we doing now? We're talking about Michael Parsons. And that's going to run the whole off season. Like, I mean, what's wrong with this organization? Like, they literally, every single season, they just do some daft things. They're going to spend the whole off season now talking about Michael Parsons. Are we going to trade him? Are we going to pay him? And then you know what happens. A day before the game starts, they're going to give him a bucket load of money. And then they would say, oh, well, you see, we can't pay everyone.
So, welcome to Across the Gridiron. This is our playoff review last night, and I know we spent a good last 20 minutes talking about a team who was nowhere near the play Super Bowl. Um, I really got to stop mentioning Dallas Cowboys in front of you. Last time we did that, you went on a 10-minute rant at the end of the show. We had to make a separate video where I had to apologize to everyone and said, oh, right. We will do at the end of the season. I promise you, Eddie. I promise. You've already gone rogue and created your own video. You've gone back to the Across the Gridiron roots when it was just yourself to have your little your little rant. We will go deeper. We will have a therapy session. I'm almost thinking that when we do the Dallas Cowboys chat, we will rent out a room. We'll get a therapist chair, right? You can lie on it and you can just rant. I'll be there with, glasses, clipboards if I'm a therapist, right? But if I could turn you back to the Super Bowl, which was last
Yeah,
night, right?
yeah. Jalen
um,
Hurts MVP.
yeah, look, it's was it the MVP? I don't know. Look, if you'd a quarterback
It's
and
a
you
quarterback thing.
it's a quarterback thing, isn't it?
Quarterback thing.
You show what these sort of garbage yards that Mahomes and co put up towards the end of the game, because I think at the end of it, if I could find sort of the overall stats of it, Mahomes had 257 passing yards.
Yeah.
That was more than Jalen Hurts,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, he had three touchdowns. Hurts had two.
Yeah.
But it just, what he did, he led that team in just incredibly well.
Yeah.
He look, I think he deserved his moment. I
Yeah.
think there's been a lot of stuff said about Jalen Hurts, mostly by you, um, to see if he if he is really Super Bowl. And he was a player who, we've talked about the Cowboys. This
Yeah.
was a guy in college who was bench for Tua.
Mm.
And he was signed when he was drafted to the Eagles. He said, look, he's a wide receiver cosplaying as a quarterback.
Yeah.
So he's carried this stigma throughout his whole career. He lost his first Super Bowl, although he played well. Um, and this season, people are saying it, he's the weak link in that
Yeah.
offense. And everything's carried by the running back. I think what it's showing coming out now is that the Eagles just use Barkley's probably their best defensive player, no doubt,
Yeah.
but they have multiple weapons.
Yeah.
They have, and they use Barkley when they needed to
Yeah.
put in, some ridiculous stats this year. But you've still got Smith, you've still got Brown, and Hurts can pick those guys out, and he led the team to that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So I'm it makes sense to give him that MVP. I think overall it was the defense.
It
If
was
that defense,
defense. Yeah.
if that defense wasn't there, putting that pressure on Mahomes would have had a better day.
Yeah.
But he just got rattled, I think,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Kelsey got rattled, and but no, fair play to Hurts. So I don't. We're obviously at Across the Good Eye, we don't go into forensics on all this on all this kind of stuff. So let's just. Is there any particular play that kind of stood out to you as like a holy S moment, or anything that you think sort of change the tide from your side?
I mean, there are a couple of plays, right? There was a play that wasn't allowed that was called for offensive pass interference. So I think it was a fourth down play, and Hurts hit AJ Brown down the sideline, and he was then called back, for offensive, yeah, for a push in the face, and that was the play that made me think, oh crap. this guy's this guy's mean business.
They're here to play.
They're here to play. They're not here to play about this thing. They're here to take it all. That play was, first of all, I was like, the audacity, in making that play, on a fourth down. Because usually fourth down, you just want to get the fourth down, right? You're not really trying to go for broke. This was something that you would put in the feet of Dan Campbell, Lions, because they're the ones that try and do all this crazy stuff at fourth down and stuff like that. And to be fair, the Eagles have been aggressive a little bit in the fourth down over the season. But to do that kind of play, not a quarterback sneak and stuff like that, I thought to me, okay, these guys have got more from where that came from. Um, and then, of course, you talked about the Devontae Smith touchdown. That was in the fourth quarter. It was like almost 2 minutes left, and it was bomb 60 yards into Devontae Smith, and you're just like, okay, this is crazy. For me, I thought that first play was it when I thought to myself, okay, this is not going very well. And then so many times the Chiefs would get on the pitch and then Patrick Mahomes would be jogging out almost after a few seconds. And you're thinking, okay, this is not normal because normally the Chiefs get on the pitch and then you're like, crap, I don't know when I'm gonna get the ball again.
Mhm.
So I think there were things like that, that made me think, okay, the Eagles have really come to play. And there were a lot of miscues, by the Chiefs that you just knew it wasn't going to be their day. I think for me, it was when it went 17-0. That was when I thought, nah, this thing is done.
Mhm.
This thing is done. And then they had the interception again, when they were close to the goal line. And then, once they scored that 7 points and made it 24 nil in that first half, I just thought, yeah, I can't see a Patriots like comeback. Uh,
No, I mean, yeah,
so,
I mean, for me, I mentioned before, it was that sack, pick six.
yeah,
And I think that showed me where the momentum is. Look, pick six can happen. You could be progressing down the field and it could just be one bad play. But you've got to let, you can just say stuff, yep, shit happens. We were
yeah,
building momentum, but the ball just got, we made a mistake. But when you basically have not got the ball in your opponent's half all game, you could barely convert. I think at that point, they only converted one first down,
press down.
and then they getting punched in the mouth time after time again.
Yeah,
Two sacks, pick six. For me, that was an absolute. I mean, that was an absolute kick in the face. That one. I mean, that mentally must have been incredibly difficult to come out. Now they've all said the right things. So at the end of the game, they've all come out and said the right things that they always believed. They could get back into the game, but there was no way that the Eagles playing as well as they were. This wasn't okay. We're unlucky to be 3 scores down, 4 scores down. No, they had been outplayed, outclassed in all 3 phases. It would have had to take a monumental turnaround for them to, and it didn't even. It just never looked likely. But so yeah, look, it was a fantastic day for the Eagles. Um, very well deserved victors last night. I don't think anyone could say different. But let's sort of finish this off now. I think the season is done. We're going to come back and do some reviews on each team and each division, give our sort of scores for the end of it. But let's just quickly look at these two teams. Let's look at what this means for them for next season, and let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs.
yeah,
Obviously, the three-peat is gone, done and
yeah,
dusted. Let's
yeah.
not take away from the fantastic achievement they had to even get to this Super Bowl
Mhm.
and the fantastic what Mahomes has done, Travis Kelsey, if he continues, if he retires, and he really look fantastic even to get to this stage is brilliant. But this was a massive disappointment for them,
It was.
and not just the score, but the performance. So how do you think this affects them next year? Do you think this is something they're going to like learn from? Do you think they're going to be back in the Super Bowl next year, or do you think this is actually not the beginning of the end? Because Mahomes is still too young for us to say that.
Yeah.
This isn't Belichick and Brady towards the end of their careers. But how do you think? What did the Chiefs take into next season? How do you think this affects them?
I think the Chiefs take the fact that they've lost the Super Bowl before. Um, and I think that, unlike any other team, are probably more equipped, to recover from a Super Bowl loss. And they've done it in the past, recover from, losing in the Super Bowl and going straight back, into the Super Bowl again and then winning. So, they've done that route before, and I think I'll be fairly confident that, they can do it again. Uh, um, I think their model is fairly established. They will replenish the team. They will look at where, they had some weaknesses. I expect them to do a lot of stuff on their offensive line because they cannot afford for Patrick Mahomes to be running for his life in the next season. So I think that they would learn from this. They will stock up, restock. Andy Reid is still there, Patrick Mahomes still there. So you know that they're a team that are capable of coming back again. And when you look at the AFC, right, and I know that look at the competition. You've got Josh Allen that arguably this was supposed to be his year. He was the MVP of the league, which we called. Um, so he was the MVP, and you thought if there was anyone that was going to dethrone Patrick Mahomes, it would have been Josh Allen. You had Lamar that had out of the world performance with Derrick Henry. It was like Batman and Robin, the two of them, just demolishing everyone. So you've got that, but then you've got the likes of Bo Nix, making a bit of a appearance for the Broncos. You've also got Justin Herbert,
These guys.
the Dolphins. You've got Tua, right? We've got to talk about Tua. And more importantly, is he going to be healthy? We know when he's healthy, he's going to do. But you've got the likes of Tyreek Hill was out of there. So there's
No,
probably
he's apologized. We're okay. We're everything. We're all good.
yeah, he's apologized, but you know how these things go, right? They will wait until someone might come in and do a bid for him. You never know, right?
Yeah,
It's one of those things where so you kind of look at the AFC and you're like, you look at all of those people and you still think Mahomes is the best quarterback, right? Out of all of them. So I think that they will feel confident they can refill, restock, and go again.
I agree. I think with the AFC next year, the AFC's it's a really, really tough conference. As you said, you do have a lot of pretenders to that AFC crown with the Bills and with the Ravens. They're the other sort of elite teams, and you've got a few sort of in sort of the tier below that, I would say, like your Steelers and your Dolphins, and then you've got Bo Nix you mentioned is a really it's going to be really important to see how he gets on in
Yeah,
his next season. Yeah, I think the Chiefs will still go in as one of the favorites, but I think a lot's going to change. I mean, in terms of what other people can draft, they're
yeah,
not going to have a high draft pick, of course. Um, I certainly don't think this is the end of it for the Chiefs by any stretch of the imagination. But if you look at Brady, he went to I think did he go to 10 Super Bowls in his career?
you did.
Won seven, lost three. I can see if Mahomes stays fit and he stays healthy and these Chiefs have built a good team, continue to build a good team around him, I think he could have a similar kind of longevity. Possibly, he's only 29. He could do this for another 10 years. But even the Patriots, they had time. They had years where they didn't get there. It wasn't 10 consecutive years. And I think the Chiefs have to take their medicine. They
Yeah,
need to realize that they've got to the Super Bowl, but this season wasn't as good as they would have expected. But there's a clear sign of where their weaknesses were. in that Super Bowl pointed out was that offensive line. Um, and then there's a big question mark over Kelsey because if
Mm,
he's going, he needs to be replaced, and he could argue he probably needs to be replaced anyway because he just the regular season they keep him in cotton wool. He's not always productive during the regular season because they save him for these big moments, but the big moments weren't there for them this
yeah,
season.
yeah. I mean, it's been a good run, like you say, with some of those players, and maybe it might be a time to restock. Yeah, I'm sure the Kansas City Chiefs, it's a bit like Brady and the Patriots. They always seem to find that next player that comes
Hmm.
and does something.
Absolutely, they really were about the collective, weren't they? And I think that I think when they lost their last Super Bowl, they lost to Brady,
Yeah,
didn't they? And this, you know, was it going to be a passing of the torch moment between the goat and then the pretend goat or the new goat? But this was, I think, it's different. I think this defeat was very different than that Buccaneers game. I said this was a 40-20, this was a 40-22 game that in reality was 46.
yeah,
Those last big points, I think they put up like 16 odd points, whatever it was, in the fourth quarter towards the end. And, there was one pundit over here in the UK just called them garbage yards. And that's exactly what they were.
yeah.
But let's have the final part of the show, final part of the season before we before we go into reviews. Let's talk about the Super Bowl champions. Let's talk about your beloved Philadelphia Eagles. Let's give the final word to them because they were fantastic yesterday. They fully deserve the win, fully deserving of the Super Bowl of the Lombardi Trophy. How do you think they're going to go into next season? And what shape do you think they're going to next season? Because
I,
they've got two guaranteed wins over the Cowboys already, so they're already 2-0 for the season. So we know that. But how
uh,
how do you think next season looks for the Eagles?
I think the Eagles are going to be talked about like the 49ers were a couple of years ago, where everyone started the season expecting them to go very far, in the NFC. And I think, they're the one team that everyone will be like, okay, right, if you get past the Eagles, and to an extent, maybe people would include the Lions as well, just because of what
Hmm.
they did. But if you get past those two teams, there's a very good chance you're going to get to the Super Bowl. The NFC is not necessarily stocked with a lot of great quarterbacks. We've got Jaden Daniels, who is also in the same division as the Eagles. So that's going to be interesting, to see how that shapes up, to see how that kind of pans into, what potentially will play out across the teams. And it's it's going to be fascinating because they're going to start getting everyone's best shot. A bit like Kansas City Chiefs. Every time you play the Chiefs, everyone brings their A game. And I think the Eagles will start to get that from every single team because beating the Super Bowl champions is something, right? If you're a team and you beat the Eagles, you're going to get a lot of confidence, from doing that because you're going to be thinking to yourself, we just beat the Super Bowl champions. And so if we did beat the Super Bowl champions, perhaps we could go far. So they've got the players, all the players are very young. The offensive line is young, their defensive line is young. You've got, people in their defense that are young players as well. The only thing that you can say that every team always looks out for is injuries, health.
Hmm.
If you get injured, your key players, we've seen that team's season completely derailed just because one or two players get injured. And the Eagles have been very fortunate. All their main players, not a single one had any significant injury this season. And the thing that comes with going to the Super Bowl is that you play more games than everybody else. So you play what 20 games by the time you get to the Super Bowl, while some people have only played 16, 17, some people, maybe only 15 because maybe the last two games, they know they're out of it, so now they're trying, players and stuff like that. But when you get to the Super Bowl, you now get into that territory like the Chiefs, where you've played more games than everyone, you got less rest than everyone, and in a month's time, you're expected to come back into mini camp, all of that, as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they can maintain this high level, and they're potentially going to lose the offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, who's going to be going to the Saints. So, and the last time that happened, when they got to the Super Bowl, they lost their offensive coordinator. They brought one in, and they had that deep towards the end of the season where everything just went down. So, this is going to be another test for them to see how they recover from the loss of Kellen Moore, who I'm sure is probably going to go. I think there is no other way of leveraging your moments. You're going to the Super Bowl as the OC, winning the Super Bowl, and playing the way that your offense did. That gives you a lot of credibility to become a head coach somewhere else. So, yeah, I think the Eagles will be formidable, as painful as that is for me to say. I think that the NFC has got, a chance for them to get back again.
Yeah, I do. We're looking at another dynasty, Eddie. If they get Super Bowl next year, that's three Super Bowls in 4 years. That's dynasty talk. Uh, but I think you're right. The NFC is hasn't been the best division for a while. I think it's fair to say. Um, and it showed that I think that showed with how well Washington did
Yeah,
this season. Right, they came from nowhere. Right, the 49ers when they got to the Super Bowl, they sort of came from nowhere with
yeah,
Mr. Irrelevant leading the charge.
yeah,
Um, so I think they're silly could be there. They've got a young team. They've got their franchise quarterback now. They've got Barkley, franchise running back. They've got this amazing defense, which again that's got a couple of highly sought after rookies who have done a fantastic job since they've come in. These are a team they could potentially build on. The
yeah,
one issue that the one doubt I have in the back of my mind about the Eagles is the potential for them to self-implode,
yeah,
not just on the field, but as an organization potentially. Because, it was after they were 4 games in, 2-2, and the fans wanted the coach's head. Right.
yeah,
Ludicrous. Right.
yeah,
They're a very passionate fan base. They know their football, but they often think too much with their hearts and with their heads.
yeah,
Hopefully, this Super Bowl will join everyone together. But we also talked about the running backs throwing spitting their dummies out at some point in the season because they weren't getting the ball enough.
yeah, yeah.
And
Listen,
that's every wide receiver.
yeah, but that would be music to my ears, right? Nothing would make me be so happy than a Eagles implosion. Fans, calling for the coach's head, after one bad game, and Jalen Hurts being traded after 3 games, and all of that. So, hey,
To the Dallas Cowboys.
there's no chance. I'm not taking him at all. I'd rather have Dak Prescott. He's been tainted by the Eagles, but I will have Saquon Barkley. Thank you
Yeah,
very
yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah, Barkley. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's going to do a tour of that division, isn't he?
but just on Barkley though, how I don't know how he would be feeling, right? I know he's won the Super Bowl. I know he was the offensive player of the year. But somehow at the back of his head, would he be thinking about that record? Could he
No,
have had it all? Could he have had it
he's
all?
no. He's got this season. He's got so many records, and he's got a Super Bowl ring. You look at where he was a few, not that long ago at the New York Giants,
Yeah,
going nowhere fast. He's a Super Bowl winner, one of the most important cogs in that team, setting records everywhere.
yeah,
Absolutely, he may not have had, he might not have had the numbers yesterday, but it was the fact that he was even there. The fact that the Chiefs put so much attention onto him opened the rest of the fields up.
yeah.
So he'll be looking at his ring and thinking, you know what? I think I've done all right this season.
Yeah, you may be right. You may be right. I think lots of players, go through their whole career and don't even sniff the Super Bowl. Never
Or the
mind.
playoffs. No, or the
Yeah.
playoffs.
Never mind, winning it. And look at Aaron Rodgers, right? He's about to retire. He's won one Super Bowl. He's not been back since.
Yep.
The fact that you get to a Super Bowl and you win it, you gotta take it because as much as we say, with the Chiefs that they seem to make it look easy, they get to the Super Bowl year after year, and maybe the Eagles now that have done it in 2 out of 3, but it's very hard to get to the Super Bowl. Like so many things have to go right for you. Look at Joe Burrow. He would have thought his NFL career would have been Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, because he went in his second year. It's not been there since.
Nope.
Uh, Russell Wilson would have thought his career was going to be Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl. Won one, went to the next one, lost it, not been there since.
Mhm.
And there is lots of stories like that, of quarterbacks who you almost think that you're, you know, coasting into the Super Bowl. And then you get there, you never get again. Sometimes you get there, you don't win, and you're never there again throughout your career. So you're all right. Saquon Barkley will be looking at his ring and be like, I like the way that looks.
Yeah, it fits
Um,
quite nicely. I'll take that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you might be right. You might be right there.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end. So, um, I'll just say before I wrap up, Eddie, thank you for joining me on the ride for bringing me onto the ride for across the gridiron this season. It's been great to be part of the team.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed this immensely, and I would just say thank you for everyone to watching. But Eddie, as always, I'll hand over to you to take us home.
Listen, right, we got climax. Not the kind of climax that we were looking for. When
What a
you
way to take us home! I didn't. I know you
well,
like the Eagles, Eddie, but I didn't know you liked them that much.
for the Dallas Cowboys, this wasn't a happy ending at all. To see the Eagles, go ahead and lift that Lombardi, trophy. There were a lot of things that the Cowboys would have wanted to lift at this season, but they weren't. And it's been a great season, but I have to say that, seeing this season play out the way that it did in terms of the moments that we've had, moments that we've talked about, in this podcast, over the season, having you guys, actually just be with us throughout. I think there's a lot for us to be grateful for. And, I'm so excited about the next season. And, guys, we're still going to be sending videos out. So don't forget to like and subscribe and, share this, with everyone around. And, if you love what we've been saying, have your say as well. We want to see you in the comments, section as well. So drop something there. Matt, has been a good one. Thank you as well for coming in and, taking this to a different level because, certainly, across the gridiron for, a good part of the season has really just taken off and, your contribution has been, immensely felt. So also my appreciation to you as well. And to everyone else, let's enjoy the off season and then we start building up hope again to the Dallas Cowboys getting to the Super Bowl next season.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be good if we had Dolphins Cowboys playoffs next
I mean,
Super Bowl
Dolphins,
next season?
Cowboys. Listen, if the Dolphins and the Cowboys make it to Super Bowl, Matt, we have to go. We definitely have to find a way to go and watch that because
Well,
that's a once in a lifetime thing.
maybe if all of our near 19,000 subscribers donated £1 on Patreon, then we might be able to afford it. That might be able to give us like one seat with a, what
Ab-
one seat with a restricted view.
Absolutely. Imagine being able to do that, So
I don't,
Cowboys,
I,
if
yeah,
you're
I don't. The
listening.
problem is if me and you went over to America, I don't think either of us will have a wife or kids when we get back. I think that's a major problem.
On that note, guys, let's let's wrap it all up. I will see you in the next one.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the